Hello everyone, ladies, gentlemen, and otaku alike. This is Recall Reviews. Attilio back here again, and today we're going to go into the third and final dedicated video on the Zostuic 4K point-and-shoot camera. In this video, I'm going to basically cover some of the different settings, in this case mainly the white balance settings, that this camera has, and test it both indoors and outdoors in different kinds of lighting and environments, which is something I had not done in my previous two dedicated videos to this camera. And I do count the larger camera comparison video as a dedicated video, since I had an entire 6 minutes just on this specific camera, as well as the Christmas gift buying guide idea video where I put this camera through a couple more tests. But in this case, we're going to be checking the white balance indoors and outdoors and see which ones work better, as well as the fact I'm going to show you some footage that I filmed over the holidays and other things, and pictures I took in settings that weren't the most ideal for light. So aside from what the cameras can actually physically capture, as far as based on the scope of everything, I can definitely see the colors look a little more natural and warmer on the Sony 4K Handycam versus the Zostuic 4K point and shoot, which again is really kind of 2.7K. Again, that's the sweet spot I found for this camera, for me personally, and what I would use it for. But the fluorescent setting definitely captures things much brighter. Now I'm going to switch over to the daylight setting and see how it looks compared to the 4K. Alright, so now I have it set back to its daylight functions, which again, for the most part, the only two I'm really going to be using are going to be the fluorescent and the daylight functions, which is why I'm putting so much emphasis between the two of them. Now, based on what I can see on the screens directly in front of me, the daylight setting is a lot closer to what the Sony is going to be capturing, and is a lot closer to what it actually looks like. So I think it's an interesting, I enjoy doing tests like this because it's just kind of fun for me. But I definitely think now maybe filming on the inside, maybe daylight's just a good base to keep the Zostuic 4K point and shoot kind of permanently set at. Again, unless if you're maybe in a lower lit indoor building, like if I ever use this to film any matches at shows as the stationary camera, then I guarantee I'd probably have it set to fluorescent just so the screen looks a little brighter. Okay, so I'm doing a low light, randomly alternating light test. I have it set to its daylight function, and I'm just doing a little walk around here. You can see it's not really handling the shifting lights and the different tones well. Okay, so now I'm doing the same test, still on the daylight setting, and taking a walk through. It's definitely with obviously better lighting. It looks a little nicer. It's holding the tone a little bit better. It's not shifting. It may, when we make this turn, no, it held okay. Now I'm going to try the same thing, but have it set to its fluorescent, which again is kind of my preferred way to film indoors. I feel like it just kind of captures all the colors a little more naturally. The whites look white, the darks look dark, tans and reds are a little washed out, but you can fix that in post. Now I have it switched back to daylight, which, now that I'm kind of looking at it, I think I'm going to go back on what I said about liking fluorescent more for indoor settings, at least filming down here. I do kind of like the tone and colors in the daylight. It's definitely much warmer. So we're here now, and I have it set to its auto white balance setting. This is in general what it looks like. To me, it feels like there's a little bit of a like goldish or almost a yellow kind of hue. It works. It doesn't look bad. But and I guess for like a quick grab and go, you can just grab it and go, keep it on auto, and it'll do its thing. But to me, there's just something a little off about it to me. But let's take a look at the daylight setting. So this is its daylight white balance setting. And this is what it looks like indoors in what is a really well lit room. And I feel like there's a little less of that yellowish tint that the auto has. Now, I could just be seeing it incorrectly because my eyes aren't so great anymore. But to me, this looks like it's the most natural colorization. And I think that this might end up being the best grab and go setting. But let's check out the cloudy setting. This is the cloudy setting. Now, to me, it looks like the saturation went down a little bit. I'm not entirely sure when I'll be in a situation that will capitalize the most on using the cloudy setting, but in general, it's okay. I guess if you're in the ultra-specific circumstance, this might be okay. But let's move on to the fluorescent, which is kind of the one I think will be the best. So this is the fluorescent white balance setting in the indoor setting in good, bright, fully lit, nice lighting. In general, I don't think it looks too bad, but I feel like the color saturation is definitely turned way down. This, I feel like, would be what you would want to film on if you're really into doing some color correction and adjusting things of that nature. Now, let's take a look at the tungsten setting. Well, here's the tungsten setting, and I don't know if I have the words to describe how awful this is. Everything's got this kind of gross blue-gray tint and hue on it, like a weird, I'm trying to look like I'm under the sea filter or something. I don't think you will ever have a reason or need to use the tungsten filter, but maybe we'll see how it looks outside. It might be a little better.
We're just giving people
Very good.
Yeah.
Is he gifting?
Although
It feels really
He's
good.
gifting himself to his
Something really
neighbors.
nice, giving a little bit of us to people in the neighborhood. Just
And them
to show
liking
that-
it.
Yeah, they love it.
although it doesn't handle light transitions too well, you see it shifting its color balance.
You're all for this now. Before you
Oh,
were like,
for the cost, that makes
now you're
sense.
like, we should do more.
Well, yeah, but for like $50, the fact that this thing's as good as it is, I'm surprised.
So like if you're like filming it at like me, depending on how stable the lighting is, you'll see me fade. You'll see the saturation dip to like black and white, and then kind of come back depending on So when I use it, I have to use it.
I can see the changes.
Right. So like when I like use it, I have to like really what's it called? Show.
Do something together, and I think that you just
I forgot what it's called. So it's like when I use it, I have to really show, make sure I'm in a really well lit room or outside in the light. So
You need a lot of natural light to make it kind of rebalance out.
if we had all the lights in the room on, it'd stay pretty consistent. I'm making what's like my third video on this camera, like about the settings and playing with it and the best circumstances in which to use it. So I'm so I'm putting it through a bunch of tests because I want to, and I'm gonna put it up on YouTube. So you're gonna be on my YouTube channel.
Oh, fun.
Back away. Indeed. Run.
Where's the bag of food? Oh, God.
I'm not yelling at Ren for no reason.
I'm gonna be.
I want some.
You don't get them. Whoa, profanity.
Bro, shut the fuck up. You said worse shit.
So here we are now out here by the fire. Nice and warm. A lot of heat. Not the best looking fire that I've put together. But I had it set up in one way and then somebody threw a bunch of stuff on top of it. So it's kind of a little haphazard. But it's pretty good. Getting a lot of heat, which is nice because it's starting to get real cold out now. It's about 30 degrees, give or take. And while we're here, let's take a look at some of those white balance options. So, as we were already filming, we had it set to daylight. So now I have it set to cloudy. And at least from this distance, I can't see much of what it looks like from the screen. But at least I can see everything's in frame. And, oh man, just seriously, that's a nice little heat right there. But yeah, as far as the cloudy function goes, it definitely helps in a lower light setting. Now let's move on to the next one. So now I have it set to the fluorescent white balance. And, you know, things, at least in my opinion in general, maybe not necessarily for outside, but in most indoor settings, I tend to really like the fluorescent setting because I think it gives it kind of the best interior lit look. I think it's a little more natural on the colors, and it's a little bit brighter, I think. And of course, any of these you can always adjust in post, but this is really trying to find what the best grab-and-go setting for this camera is. So now we're going to move on to that tungsten one, which just kind of inside made everything a little blue. Maybe it'll be different out here. So now with the tungsten setting, yeah, it still looks like everything's got a blue like filter on it. What the tungsten setting is for, I really don't know, but I see it in a lot of these cheaper cameras. So let's move back to the daylight function and get another look at that. So now I have it set back to its daylight function. And I feel like for being outdoors, the daylight setting on the white balance is probably my favorite one to use outside because I feel like the colors are a little bit warmer and maybe a little more vibrant. And as far as my indoor settings go, I like the fluorescent look the most because I feel like it gives you kind of the best for editing in the sense of in some lighting, the fluorescent setting indoors looks really good, and in others, little minor tweaks in post will get you the desired look you want as far as the colorization goes.
Well, there you have it. That's the final dedicated video to the Zostuic 4K point-and-shoot camera. Now, I'm going to try and keep my final thoughts on this as quick as I possibly can because you've heard me talk about this camera way more than any rational human being ever should. This camera for the price point is surprisingly good. Again, for $50, you get good video, good audio, and good still frame photos, and it accepts external microphones. So I think that all around is an absolute win. Keep in mind, Had this camera cost me any more money, my praise for it wouldn't be nearly as strong as it is. In general, Amazon does sell this exact same camera for $80. And had I bought this for $80, I think I would have had way less glowing praise for this camera. But at $50, this is a great camera to have, especially if you're going to do a lot of traveling, and it's an easy grab and go camera. In my case, I take this with me to a majority of places I go where I might be filming something smaller, taking pictures, because this, for $50, if it gets lost, broken, or stolen, it is far easier to replace than my Sony 4K or any of my other more expensive video cameras. Unless if we're specifically doing a show, in which case I need to maximize the amount of quality. So obviously I would need to bring my more expensive, better equipment to capture the best quality I can out of the footage, regardless how good or bad some of the matches may end up being. But quickly going over the white balances, tungsten, I'm going to start there. What the hell is tungsten for? I don't think I'll ever be in a situation where I'm going to need to use tungsten as a white balance setting. That gross blue-gray hue makes you look like you're a poorly filtered underwater shot. So if anybody in the comments knows what tungsten is good for, I'll give it a shot and do a little follow-up in another video just kind of about the tungsten setting. The auto white balance, I feel like everything kind of had that yellowish gold tint to it. And I have to say, you notice the changes in the white balance more so setting to setting when you're outdoors versus indoors. Because the auto, daylight, and cloudy indoors all looked relatively identical, just with various states of saturation. I still think now that daylight is best for outdoors filming still, unless if maybe fluorescence surprises me again in the future. Because originally, now I'm reshooting this because I ran some more tests on the camera in between, because the fluorescent started looking a lot better. So originally, even indoors, the fluorescent white balance setting was not as good as it was when I filmed in my office at work. In that case, I had the ideal lighting. But whether it be due to the amount of natural light coming in today, the fluorescent on this camera from all angles, I'll give you a quick little spin around. So the reason why I wanted to do this little bit of extra filming is because I had neglected to film the other white balance tests that you saw earlier in the video. So those were all refilmed very recently. So I decided to, well, refilm the fluorescent test. And when I looked at it both on screen on the camera and in post and editing, and it just looked, here, I'll scoop you up for a second. It just looked so much better. And I can't really explain necessarily what it is about it, but I think now that fluorescent, here we'll turn around again, I think that fluorescent in general is the best for indoor filming. At least if you can get the right spot in a room that is lit like this, you can get yourself some pretty good looking footage. And I think that the colors and how it's saturated, strangely enough, looks a lot better than it did earlier in the video with my original filming testing this setting out. So the fluorescent, I think, might take the win for indoor filming. And even if the saturation dips a little bit as far as how the fluorescent will capture in an average lit room, you can always change it to daylight and it'll still look alright, but in both cases you can always do a little bit of color correction to try and fix it. So for outdoor settings, I'm gonna say that daylight is the way to go. It's warm, the saturation is nice, it captures the outdoors very well, and for, I think, at least 70% of indoor applications, I think fluorescent on this camera might be the way to go. In 30% of settings, like nighttime, lower light, I think daylight might be the way to go. But thank you so much for watching. Tune in next time, and I hope that we all have a wonderful 2025, and I'll see you next time.